Thanks everyone for joining. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Sarah Lang. I run the Southern Vermont Economy Project, which is a program of the Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation. This is our third project stewardship workshop this week. First, we talked about Welcoming Communities program that BDCC is launching. Then on Wednesday, we talked about the Putney General Store and the incredible sort of up and down journey that they've been on to get to where they are today. And then last but definitely not least, we have Jared and Andre Ann here to talk about Bennington Area Trail System and Catamount BMX. These project stewardship workshops are part of a larger series, the project development series that my program is putting on. So this is one of 4 topics, and the next 3 are financial management for projects, project management, and grant writing. So I'm gonna put a file into the chat that has sort of all that information there if you're interested in the upcoming parts of the series. All right, I'll mute myself, Maggie, and hand it over to you. Maggie's facilitating our conversation today.
Thank you. And thanks for everyone for joining us. I feel like for some reason, trails feels like a fitting way to end the week, a very Friday topic to talk about. I feel like I could use some recreation in my life. So I'm happy to be talking about this today. This is, Sarah mentioned, as part of the project stewardship series. I've been thinking about stewardship all week and kind of differentiating it in my mind from project management. And where sometimes I think project management is very specific in terms of goals and objectives and how and when and kind of directing something to happen. I think of stewardship as much more kind of that longer term vision and holding the what and the why, and also thinking about innovation and a key thing, inspiring trust and kind of inspiring other people to buy into the idea and come along with you. I think about project stewardship as something that really makes a project ultimately successful. And it's kind of becoming synonymous in my mind with grit and determination. And I think that today's 2 projects really highlight both of those things of grit and determination. And I also think I'm looking at Maggie's comment, the other Maggie in the chat, talking about a volunteer program for the trails. I also think that these 2 projects are really specific around stewardship and how they connect to volunteerism and getting people involved in your project when you don't have a big budget, but you have the will to do something. And so I think that these 2 will be really great at showing the kind of the resiliency and the idea of not giving up and basically making stuff happen. I feel like both of these people really made stuff happen in their communities in a way that they just wouldn't have had it not been for their individual will and determination. So I think they're 2 really inspiring stories, and I'm excited to get to them. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Maggie Foley, and I work as a consultant to nonprofits, primarily in Windham County. I do a lot of work around fundraising, board training and development, planning, and facilitating. And so it's nice to meet those of you that I have not met, and nice to see familiar faces on here as well. So we're going to kick things off with Jared. Let me just quickly, before we do that, go over our agenda. We're going to have Jared and Andre Ann kind of tell you the stories of both their projects, which are really interesting and kind of long and winding roads. And they'll give us some background and talk about the obstacles they've faced and the successes that they've seen. And so we'll let both Jared and Andre Ann talk for a little while, and we'll probably try to wrap up before the hour with that part. We'll take a nice 10-minute break where you can get up and stretch and think of questions and things that you want to be discussing with them. You're always welcome to add things into the chat if you want to write them down before they leave your mind, or take notes and for questions to bring up later. And then the second half, we'll really just have a open discussion Q&A with Jared and Andre Ann, and kind of you can reference your own projects, you can ask them about their projects, but they're here to be resources and kind of reflect on their experience to help you with your projects. So does that sound good for everybody in terms of agenda? Awesome. So now I'll mute myself and turn it over to Jared to tell us all about Catamount Trails.
Oh, Bennington Area Trail System. All right, can you guys hear me all right? Yes, all right, cool. My name's Jared Newell. I am on the board of Bennington Area Trail System, one of the founding members, and We started in the fall of 2015, sort of as a group of bikers and trail enthusiasts that wanted to see a multi-use trail system in the Bennington area. More specifically, kind of a bike trail system, mountain bike trail system. We had some meetings with some folks in town, and there was this interest in trying to get a trail system together, but what it really took was finding the right people to, gather and set this up. I've been in Bennington for about 10 years now. I grew up sort of in between here and Brattleboro, but just on the Massachusetts line outside of Shelburne Falls. So I know the area pretty well, and know what it's like growing up in a small town. I hopped around from various places: Colorado, Utah, Boston, and then eventually circled back to this area to start up a family. I came into the Bennington area as really enthusiastic about mountain biking, and realized that even though we're a town of 15,000, almost a city, right? Pretty big town. There was really no trail network out there. There was no public trails, nothing mapped, nothing official, nobody maintaining anything, which was kind of odd considering the size of the town. I had lived previously in Durango, Colorado, which is about the same size as Bennington, and they had a huge trail network. They had this vibrant bike trail outdoor scene, and I kind of asked myself, I was some of the guys that I biked with, I'm like, why don't we have trails out here in Bennington? We've got bikers, we've got the mountains, we've got the land, we've got everything, but it's why isn't it there? And so I had met a few folks that I biked with in the area, and things kind of came together, I guess, in the fall of 2015, when I just out of the blue saw Don Campbell, who was with the Vermont Land Trust and had just recently got elected to the select board. I saw him in the paper. I'm like, oh, a guy on the select board, Vermont Land Trust, likes trails. I'm gonna reach out to him, see what he can tell me. So I had coffee with him, and I kind of explained my idea of, let's get some trails in Bennington, and he was totally on board. We sat down with a few other folks, had a few meetings, talked stuff over, and we brainstormed, and we decided that we would set up a chapter of the Vermont Mountain Bike Association in Bennington. And this was, I had some acquaintances, some friends throughout the state and the area, most notably a fellow named Angus McCusker up in Rochester, Vermont, right in the middle of the state, who maybe a year or two prior had started up a trail group in the Rochester area, which really served as a motivation and almost like a blueprint for me to follow after. We, in the fall of 2015, we reached out to the Vermont Mountain Bike Association, who Rasta up in Rochester had established with as well. Got their director down here to Bennington at the former Southern Vermont College property, the Everett Mansion there. And it just so happened we had a pretty enthusiastic young-ish professor of recreation, Jeb Gorham was his name, on who was interested in getting involved in this. And he got his students actively engaged. He got the college kind of engaged, because the college has, sits on about 300 acres, has a lot of trails, beautiful property. The community's always used it for recreation, dog walking, biking, hiking, all that stuff, and kind of got them engaged with it. We established as a nonprofit chapter through the Vermont Mountain Bike Association, and we got the college and the town kind of together and on the same page of, let's get a trail system going. The college is a great property to kind of start this with. And that spring, we had the college sign on as our first landowner partner for BATS, which essentially means we'll maintain the trails for them, liabilities waived, insurance, all that stuff goes through the Vermont Mountain Bike Association. The neat thing in Vermont is, as long as you're not collecting money for public access, you don't need to worry about liability for the most part. So, we're not collecting any fees, any of that. It's all was very straightforward and put together by the Vermont Mountain Bike Association for us, kind of prepackaged setup. And that spring, we built our first trail on the Southern Vermont College property, and it was kind of cool. We got the professor Jed with his recreation and sports management class. We got his students, 20, 30 of them, to put on a sort of a season kickoff party for us that spring. And we broke ground on our first trail that spring. We invited members of the community, of the college, and other folks to the property, and we built our first trail, Hops and Vines, which was about a little bit over 1 mile long trail from the college down to the Monument Avenue near the hospital here in town. And that started our trail building process for BATS. We, over the years, see, that was in 2016, over the, I guess, past 5 years, we've built out around 12 miles of trail around the Southern Vermont College, Mount Anthony area. Most of it's kind of mountain bike specific, but a lot of people use them for hiking, running, dog walking, and it's all volunteer led. We've over the years, we have collected some money. We've done some fundraising and bike races, outreach, stuff like that. And we have done some paid trail building, but a lot of it's been done through volunteers, myself, and there's a core of half dozen of us that have spent hundreds of hours out there digging in the dirt, putting up signage, keeping tabs on the trails, making sure that trees are cleaned, blowdowns are cleaned up, and we leaf blow a lot of them in the springtime to get them ready for the season. And it's been great. I've met a lot of people, a lot of great people in the community, new people, natives, folks, even from the Albany area coming out to use the trails. And it's been a great thing for the Bennington community. And it's easy to find a lot of negativity, but in the area, but it's been such a great resource, a positive thing for the community, that a lot of folks have gotten behind it. And yeah, it's evolved over the years. We're a membership run organization. You don't need to be a member to use the trails, but if you are kind of into the biking scene, or just really want to help out monetarily, you can become a member of the Vermont Mountain Bike Association. Select BATS is your chapter, your home chapter, and your $50 dues for the year. Half of that money comes back to us. We use that for trail tools, projects, etc. The other 25 goes to administrative fees, and then you get this great package of free lift tickets for bike parks, Killington, Stratton, Mount Snow, Sugarbush. You get discounts at various stores throughout the state. You know, a lot of those are in the northern part of the state, as we all know how the geography is around here. But we have done some deals down in the Bennington area that VIMA members can use. We do group rides. We obviously, things got completely derailed last summer with COVID. You know, we didn't have group rides. We didn't have group trail building. We didn't really have any community outreach, but this year we'll be doing group rides. We typically do that every Wednesday. Go for a ride, go out afterward, get some pizza, some beer, beverages. And yeah, it's a great thing for the community, gets new people involved, and you know, get some good enthusiasm.
That's awesome.
Folks.
Thank you, Jared. I think after the break, I see a bunch of Brattleboro people on here that are working on trails, and just hear the difference between the Vermont. Will you remind me of the name of the Vermont network name?
Vermont Mountain Bike Association.
Yeah, the difference, because I think you mentioned that Brattleboro is more connected with Keene, and what the difference might be to be more connected with the Vermont Mountain Bike Association. And I also want you to share how it was navigating through the Southern Vermont College transition.
Definitely.
So I want to make sure to flag both of those things to talk about the.
Yeah, I can get into that now if you want me to.
Yeah, or why don't I switch over to Andrea Ann to introduce herself and talk about her project, and then I have both of those things flagged, and I will remind you about them more. So Andrea Ann, why don't you go ahead, and I won't swap my names this time, and talk about the Catamount BMX project.
Sure, thank you. So hi, everybody. My name is Andrea Ann Chanile, and I am the track operator of Catamount BMX, which is a BMX track in Bennington located at Willow Park. So just, I guess, a little bit of background. BMX racing, I guess, in general is not a hugely well-known like sport, I guess. So basically, there's BMX tracks all over the United States, and with the racing organization, it's USA BMX, so that is our sanctioning body. They basically insure us. Everyone who races with us has a membership with USA BMX, and basically they're kind of our network to all of the other BMX tracks in the United States. And we are actually, Catamount BMX is the only BMX track in Vermont, which is really awesome. So just, I guess, a little bit kind of going backwards. So I actually the BMX track has been here since 1996. So I was only a year old at that point. So I was unfortunately not part of the grassroots bringing the track together and everything. I wish I had more information about how it first started, because I'm sure that was an interesting process. But basically, I have actually been racing BMX since I was 8 years old. Catamount BMX was my first BMX track I ever went to. And I grew up racing on and off and going there. And it really always just felt like it was always a special place to me. So I kind of stopped racing for a little bit and got back into it here and there. And so I guess that brings us to, the track has been operating since 1996. But in 2017, the membership as far as local riders kind of dwindled. The person running the track wasn't necessarily recruiting as much as maybe was necessary. And she had a couple young kids that had been racing for a long time and they were kind of growing out of it. So she, I think she was trying to step away, but there really wasn't anyone in our Catamount BMX organization to take her place. And that was 2017. I was still in college at that point, and I wasn't really I was kind of out of racing at that point just because of my personal situation in life. So in 2017, October 2017 was the last race at Catamount BMX for about 3 years. So during that 3-year period between 2017 and pretty much last year, the track was just sitting there. And it's in Willow Park. So Willow Park is a public park. It's owned by the town of Bennington. So anyone can use the BMX track at any time. The only time that the public can't use it is when we're holding a sanctioned event. In that case, you have to have a membership. So people could still use the track at that point, but after winters and summers and rain, BMX tracks need to be maintained to kind of just keep their shape and keep the jumps, in riding condition. And that obviously wasn't happening. We didn't have a track operator. And like I said, there wasn't really too many people into it at that point. So I actually ended up getting back into racing, and I have to, you have to travel kind of a lot, and especially because we are the only track in Vermont and, we weren't running at that point. So I was actually in Binghamton, New York at an indoor BMX track, and I was sitting there and I was like, what are we doing? And I was talking to one of my good friends that has been in the BMX world for a long time. And he was like, well, why don't you just reopen it? And I was like, well, that's scary, but why not? So after the track was just sitting there, I decided to reach out to USA BMX, our sanctioning body, because obviously they weren't sanctioning us at that point because we weren't running. And I just kind of put my feelers out there and I said, what do we need to do? And basically all we needed was just a person to just do it. So I guess I just decided to go for it. And like I said, I had been racing for a long time, but I think racing is one thing and operating a track and running a race is, a whole different animal. And, there's a lot I didn't know. But I was like, I'll just learn as I go. I don't know. So the track, by that point, it had been sitting for over 3 years. It was in really rough shape. We had an old kind of registration booth and concession stand we had used for a long time. And that had been vandalized and broken into several times. And I really just, I said I would be track operator, and then I kind of stood there one day and I was like, oh my God, how am I going to do this? So something really big for us was USA BMX believed in me and believed in, the people behind me. And they offered to send a professional track builder to us at no cost to us. All we had to do was get the piece of equipment that the track builder needed, as well as pay for the fuel and things like that. And that was huge. I could have never done it without them doing that. So So they said they would send him, and that was part one. And then I'm trying to think, that was about August of 2019. So originally he had planned on coming in October of that year. And of course I had all of these visions of 2020 being this awesome comeback year. So in October, the track builder actually had some like family issues that came up, and so he couldn't actually come in October. So then we said, okay, we'll put it off till spring, which wasn't a big deal and probably worked out better because we wouldn't have had to re-maintain the track after the winter and all that stuff. So then spring came, and spring of 2020, and as we all know, COVID-19. So that put us back a little bit. Typically a BMX racing season starts right in like mid-May, depending on the weather and when you can get everything back dry and in shape and everything. So I was hoping for a full season, new track. It was going to be awesome. So obviously COVID put that off a little bit. The track builder was coming from Arizona, travel issues, restrictions, all of those things. So he actually ended up coming in July of last summer. And we were able to get a very large loader backhoe donated for us to use while the track builder was here by HNB Construction. And that was super awesome. So the track builder was at our track for about a week, and he mostly did the bulk of the moving of the dirt and that kind of thing. And he was kind of like, I just need to do my thing, and you guys will have plenty to do after. So we were there every night when we could be, watching him and just watching it come together. And then for about a month after he left, me and, like a handful of people that had been really excited about the rebuild, pretty much every night for a month we were there just doing handwork with shovels and rakes and packing it down with a four-wheeler and just all kinds of things like that. So I believe it was August 26th of last year, we had our first race back in 3 years at Catamount BMX. So it was very awesome. And, not everything was perfect. We had our new track, but we ended up getting rid of the old registration building because it had been, broken into, and it just wasn't going to be functional. So I was able to get rid of that. And we had to do registration outside. I had to set my computer and my printer up every single day that we had a race. And, it wasn't perfect, but people were very supportive, and everyone was just so excited to see it come back and just see it being used and maintained again. And it was just really awesome.
It's a great story. Thank you, Andrea Ann. I think both of you, for me, are like, and I mean this in the biggest compliment of a way, are both, inspiring stewardship stories and cautionary tales around stewardship, because it's a little bit of the, if you don't do it, who will thing. And that once you're in it, you kind of have to see it through to the end. And so that's what strikes me about both of your stories, is just kind of that sheer will to get the projects moving and get them done. And in a way that there really is no final completion. There's like an ongoing aspect around this stewardship that really is so different from managing a project that has a start date and a finish date, because I think both of you are still very in it with your projects. So what I want to do is take a brief break. I'd love everyone to be thinking about questions, areas for discussion. I do know that we have some Brattleboro Trail people on here. I want to think more broadly about kind of outdoor recreation and volunteerism, and how we can make these awesome things in our communities exist when we have effective project stewards involved with them. So it's 12:34, and if we take a break, we'll come back at 12:44. You can turn off your screens and mute yourself, and I'll start yelling into my computer around 12:44 to get you all back here and asking your questions. Feel free to type them in the chat box if you don't want to. I muted myself halfway through. I'm so efficient. Or come back with your questions if you'd prefer. As we make our way back, Jared, can I put you back on the spot to tell us a little bit about the property transition? I don't know if most of you on this call are familiar with this property, but it's the Southern Vermont College was the name of it, and it's that kind of big. You can describe it, Jared. I think of like grand, and let us know and tell us a little bit about the challenge with that change in ownership that happened relatively recently.
Yeah. So as you're coming into Bennington from almost any direction and you look up towards Mount Anthony, which is kind of the prominent mountain in town, at the base of it, you'll see this large stone mansion with this red call it stucco roof, I guess. Really prominent building, big fields, beautiful property. And it was a mansion that was built around the turn of the century by a fellow named Everett. I don't know his first name, but it's referred to as the Everett Mansion. Had large orchards up there. All the stone that the mansion was built from was mined out of the side of Mount Anthony by dozens of Italian stoneworkers. Just a really amazing property, big mansion. And it was after that, I believe there were actually some monks that lived there. And then after that, maybe in the 70s, it was turned into a college, Southern Vermont College, which is a small liberal arts school, maybe 500 students, very small. And over the years, they used that property. They built some dormitories up there. And like a lot of small colleges in, I guess it was 2018, maybe 2019, started running into some difficulties, and them along with, Green Mountain College and St. Joseph's and Rutland all closed down around the same time. And, went through bankruptcy. A lot of debt associated with the property. A lot of things were donated to the college, land, buildings, just a really messy situation, where this property basically just got run through the court system, through bankruptcy courts, through lenders, and everything got squeezed out of it, and they attempted to recoup as much money as possible. It got put up for sale. And then last summer, somehow in the middle of COVID, I don't know the full story, but somehow a summer camp of 300, 400 kids was allowed to set up shop there in the middle of COVID. All these kids coming in from New York City and New Jersey without any permits. Nobody really knew. Next thing you know, there's a camp close to the center of town here. So that didn't go over too well. The property was put up for sale. Some offers were made on it, and this whole thing just hung in limbo. Like, we had put so much time into trails, building stuff up there, trail kiosks, you name it. So much time and energy spent on this property, and to think that it might be bought by a private entity, especially someone who would just, completely cut off public access to it was heartbreaking. you know, for the community and especially for us, like the folks, you know, that built the trails and maintain them. It was just it was a gut punch. Thankfully, our amazing local hospital system, Southern Vermont Healthcare, came in at the last moment during bankruptcy court and put in the winning bid for the property. This, I believe that was this December. And they've gone out on a limb on so many projects in town that are just, you know, not even connected with healthcare, but they realize that in order to have a healthy community, you need to invest in it and you need to make it a good place to live, to, you know, so people are healthy, that you're able to recruit doctors and staff. And so they purchased it. It's yet to be seen what their final plans are with it. But trails, I'd say there's a very good chance that the trails will remain intact and open for public use. So it's, you know, when you're dealing with trails projects, it's really important to, I guess, look at the land use limitations, the, you know, the ownership. All of our trails are on private land. We're not a landowner. We sign access agreements with property owners that they can back out of at any time. So it's, you know, and the certain properties you're more willing to put a little bit more effort in time and maybe money if you know that they're locked up and relatively safe from ownership changes or, you know, denying access. But it's a tricky situation, and we saw this year up in Kingdom Trails. I'm sure many of you are familiar with Kingdom Trails. It's the largest bike trail network, I think, in New England, maybe the Northeast. It's up Burke, Vermont. They operate on a very similar platform where they must have upwards of 100 parcels that they have trails on, and it's all private parcels. Landowners are happy and willing to provide access for the trails, but 2 or 3 very large parcels with extensive trail networks, machine built trails, popular trails, the owners pulled out of this year because it just became too much for them. Too many people. You can imagine being I think what really stemmed it was being out on your own land, maybe riding a horse or going for a walk, and a biker runs into this person and tells you to get off the trail. And you're like, hey, that's my land. Like, and when you start having these types of experiences, it can jade you for public access. It can be an issue. So lots of things to keep in mind. That we can get into some more of those later. A lot of nuances.
That's great. Thanks, Jared. Looking at who we have here, we have, you know, Brattleboro, Rockingham, Dover, Londonderry, Jamaica. So thinking about all these different communities and their different projects, I wanted to open it up for questions and see if people have questions for Jared or Andre Ann about their projects, or if you have something in mind about a project you're working on that you want to ask for their input on. I think there's a lot here around outdoor recreation and around volunteerism that are a common thread for a lot of people's projects. Martha, go ahead.
Sure, I
And then
heard,
Stephanie.
yep, Jared, I heard you mention a random connection with somebody from the Vermont Land Trust. How were they helpful to you? What was it that was significant about that? Because I've seen their name pop up a lot with endeavors like this.
So Vermont Land Trust land is much easier to work with. It's still privately owned. It's, you know, still owned by private owners, but it has a certain kind of designation to it that allows for public use, public access. And so leveraging that type of land, actually a portion of Southern Vermont College is Vermont Land Trust land. That helps a great deal. Also, the folks that work in that, you know, work with the trust are very knowledgeable in terms of, you know, conservation, public access, current use designation. They're just, you know, they're great folks that know the ins and outs of Vermont land law and conservation law. So if there is a parcel that you're thinking of building trail on or acquiring, it might be beneficial to reach out to VLT.
Cool. It is a great organization. Stephanie, did you have a question?
I do. I wanted you to just ask your question again about Vermont, the chapter of mountain bike versus Keene.
Yes, I'll ask that again, and then we'll go to, after that, Mary, we'll go to your question in the chat. So from what I learned from Jared, is it pronounced VIMBA? Vermont?
VIMBA, yeah, Vermont Mountain Bike Association.
And from what you were saying, it seems like there's a lot of additional perks kind of with being a member of that. And there's resources and probably some level, if you're going after grants, I assume that's a strength to your application and all of that.
Yep.
Though it seems that Brattleboro's mountain bike community is more tied in with the Keene area, which was really surprising to me. I felt like for all sorts of, no offense to Keene, but for all sorts like brand reasons and other reasons, it was a surprising choice. And just curious if you know the history of that and what benefit you would see of being associated with VIMBA if you were a part of the Brattleboro mountain bike community. Is that it, Stephanie? Yeah, okay.
So there's IMBA, International Mountain Bike Association, global, all over the place, you know, chapters all across the world. Then it kind of gets broken down regionally. There's chapters in various states. There's the New England Mountain Bike Association, which has been around for a while. I can't tell you how long. I would guess at least 25, 30 years, something like that. And for some reason, and I'm guessing it's the connection between Keene and maybe Western Mass, the Pioneer Valley area, Brattleboro has had ties to NIMBA rather than VIMBA. And you know, it's kind of odd because I think it's the only, there's one other chapter that kind of straddles state lines, and that would be the one in the Upper Valley Mountain Bike Association, maybe. You know, and they're sort of Dartmouth, White River, they all kind of function together as one, but there are some chapters around the Brattleboro area, VIMBA chapters, new ones, you know, like a lot of new chapters have popped up over the past 3-4 years. There's one up in Bellows Falls, and there's one in Putney, I believe. Very, very small chapters. There's a very new one in Dover, and there might be one in Jamaica, brand new this year as well.
Could I tag on to my question, Maggie?
Mm-hmm.
Can you speak up a little bit? I'm having.
Yes, I can.
Okay.
Will you tell me what the benefit, like all these little chapters are popping up, and then there's these big, and then there's these little trails, and then there's these networks. I'd love to hear from you of, you know, in your wish list would you want things to be more connected, and how would that benefit you?
You know, I think it's difficult for a very small chapter to have leverage and get things done. We're a pretty small chapter in Bennington. I'm going to guess we have maybe like 40 or 50 members. Those are just people like paid members, but in terms of the folks that actually like do a lot of the heavy lifting, you're looking at like 4, 5, 6 people. And I can imagine that a very small chapter like, Putney or Bellows Falls, you'd get a lot of burnout with the volunteers, the folks on those board. Like I feel the burnout, like for sure. And we're kind of a mid-sized group. I think like personally, like, I think there are too many smaller chapters out there, and they could get things done a lot more efficiently if they were worked together. There's a chapter up just north of us in Manchester. They do a lot of good stuff, but we don't work with them much, even though we're 20 miles away. I think if we did work together, we might have conflicting interests in terms of where to build and what grants to go after. And obviously, like the people in Manchester want stuff directly in Manchester, the people in Bennington want stuff directly in Bennington. And you see that in, maybe that's a reason why there's a chapter in Jamaica as well as a chapter in Bellows Falls, even though they're like 3 towns apart. Yeah. Any further happy to elaborate or.
Thank you. That's good.
Get back to that. We have a few questions in the chat, but something that Jared just mentioned about burnout, I wanted to ask Andre Ann about this because I remember you talking about it. What keeps you motivated to be working on this project, and how do you use your motivation to motivate your volunteers? I think these projects are both unique because you both are volunteers. Yes, kind of harnessing the power of other volunteers to make stuff happen. So I just wanted to hear a little bit about that from you, Andre Ann.
Yeah, I'm very much still very new to this. We had 10 races last year, and then of course all of the work we did to get the track in shape and everything. And I'm pretty burnt out already, like especially since we're coming off the winter and I haven't really had to like focus on it. But now we're getting back into the summer and I need to get going. So as far as motivation, I honestly, I don't know. I guess my biggest motivation is last year I saw so many local kids that maybe don't want to play soccer and don't want to play basketball and don't want to play like those classic school sports. And maybe they don't want to necessarily be with the same people they go to school with all the time. And they just found their niche in BMX racing. And I think that's a lot of what BMX racing is it's somewhat uncommon. It's different. So truly my motivation is going to the track and seeing all of the kids, and it's families too. I mean, the kids are racing and so are their parents a lot of the times. And that's really my main motivation. And as far as keeping volunteers motivated, I'm very much still trying to learn how to do that. We really have a handful of very committed volunteers, and that's really my focus this year is pulling in, and we're still recruiting new riders and local riders, and I just definitely want to figure out how to pull in those volunteers and keep everyone motivated.
Nice.
I'm going to kind of stem off of that, talking about the kids that you see up at the track and just kind of give you a little anecdotal story. And I guess how like the connection that Andrea and myself have. I had a kid about 4.5 years ago, and I started thinking a little bit differently about, the community and I guess, and the trails and biking and in the Bennington area. And I started to think about kids and bikes and how it's a really good, fun family activity. It's healthy. It's, for the most part, low cost, and it gets kids out. And we decided maybe about 3 years ago to build a little, they call like a pump track, which is, you can think of it as like a circular bike track for kids. It's got rollers and berms, and you ride your bike on it. The idea is you don't need to pedal, you pump up and down on it. And we got a grant through VIMBA to build one of those at a community park 2 years ago. But around that time, I started, I had a 2-year-old in the house and another one on the way. And I caught wind of what Andre Ann was doing, this young, very motivated woman who's trying to get the BMX community up and running again. And I reached out to you at some point. We through social media, email, and some mutual acquaintances. And we chatted a fair amount and realized that we had a sort of common interest and common goal, I think. We're both very much like community-minded individuals. We like to do stuff for the community. And we realized that we're trying to get more kids on bikes. Like, that was kind of the goal, right? More kids on bikes. I've said that to Andrea a lot of times. And that was, that was sort of our common goal between us. And, I reached out to her a lot, really trying to get her maybe a little bit more involved in like the BATS side of things, which, is sort of a larger community thing, while hers was, just this BMX track, awesome place, kids biking, but the bigger picture of, could we kind of strengthen the bicycling vibe in Bennington and get more kids interested in it, and as they grow up, maybe into their teens, they take some ownership of the trails of the BMX track, and really have some pride for the community in that regard. And so I reached out to her. Andrea started attending BATS meetings with us, and then a year ago we invited her on the board of BATS, and she graciously accepted. And so we're trying to kind of foster a synergy between BATS and Catamount BMX, with the common theme of more kids on bikes. So just wanted to get that little anecdotal story out there.
Yeah, I really like it, Andrea, and I liked what you said about, helping the kids find something that really fits them.
Yeah.
And I think that's what part of what makes our community so cool is, you guys are looking at the kids at bikes angles, but I also think there's like all those kind of like little specialty areas that if you look at, whether it's the ski jump or circus school or things like that, that make a place unique and special. And there's more than the standard offering. I love that strong tagline, more kids on bikes. So there's some great questions in the chat, and two of them are kind of connected. Mary had asked, do others use the bike trails? And also kind of on a related note, how do you monitor and control mixed use of trails? And so I'm thinking about horses and dogs and bikes and kids. Like, what are the challenges there? What have you learned? What would you say to others that are looking to develop trails when you think about managing those different you know, four-legged and two-legged and two-wheeled entities.
Yeah, it's a tough thing to balance. Nobody wants to be out biking, or nobody wants to be out hiking and run into a group of like a dozen bikers who are, you know, trying to race or, you know, go as fast as they can. Likewise, you don't really want to run into a horse while you're biking, or, you know, there's this constant sort of conflict of interest. And I wish I could say I had a one size fits all type solution for that, but I don't. We, on our, you know, the BATS trails, the area, we found that there's certain types of trails that people like for dog walking more than biking, or running more than hiking. Our bike trails, which, you know, we spend the vast majority of our time working on bike trails, but we maintain, you know, some of the walking paths and things like that. I think to have a good variety of trail types is important. You know, bikers like single track that isn't super steep and is pretty narrow, dirt. Hikers like something a little bit wider. Hikers also don't mind going a little bit, you know, steeper in grade. So if you are thinking about having a truly multi-use trail system, you're going to want to have different types of trail in there that would, you know, maybe like separate various user groups just based on the trail style.
Is there a benefit to limiting use to a specific, limiting access to
I think so, yeah. Yep. I look at the Mile Around Woods, which are a very popular trail network in North Bennington. Maybe similar to the retreat trails. It's been a while since I've been on the retreat trails, but very popular with walkers and dog walkers. And no bikes allowed. And I think that's great, because when you have a place with a ton of pedestrian activity and you mix some bikes in, it might not go over well, especially when there's a lot of dogs. You know, dogs and horses, or just, you know, animals in general, are kind of throw a wrench into things. And
Yeah, I'm imagining like a bike and the leash and the, you know, all of the collision. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, likewise, I wouldn't recommend that you go up to Kingdom Trails and walk on the trails up there. Even though they are multi-use, it's going to get a little old having to move over every couple minutes and let a group of bikers come by. So yeah, it's something that thankfully we haven't had any major issues with conflict of use. But it, you know, especially if we were to grow and be more of a destination type trail network, that would definitely run into some issues where, you know, you might have people coming in from like the Albany area, or, you know, cities, and feeling a little bit more entitled to have their bicycle ride. And then you're interacting with the locals who are up there every day walking their dog. And, you know, I could see something like that happening.
Yeah. I like that correction, from any issues to any significant issues.
Yeah. I mean,
there's minor issues here and there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Andrea and Mary wanted to know about your big race. Like, was there a good response to it? Where did riders come from? How did that work out, and how did that feel?
Yeah, so opening day was pretty big. A lot of people had heard that that I was becoming the track operator, and of course there was a long period of time in between. And and there's really not too many BMX tracks around here. Notably closest to here, there's one in Rotterdam, New York, which is about an hour away from here. Next closest is Westfield, Mass, and then Torrington, Connecticut. So us BMX racers were a little crazy. We travel far and wide to catch our races and get our points. So a lot of people, there was a big response, but also it was August of last summer. So it was before Vermont went to not allowing anyone out of state. There was still that kind of color-coded state map going on, or county map, I guess it was. So there was a good response, but at the same time, you know, I had to put it out there that there were these requirements, and but I didn't specifically have to see like where this person was coming from, if they were a red or a yellow county or whatever. I didn't do that. It was really up to them to be responsible and do their due diligence. But we had, I believe it was about 120 riders, which it's a good response. You know, it could be bigger, but it could have been a lot smaller as well. We were, before the track closed in 2017, we were maybe running on like 20 riders, probably not even that. It was hard. So yeah, it was a really great response. And like I said, there's a lot of traveling involved in BMX racing. So definitely people from throughout the Northeast, maybe not so much for opening day and the tail end of last season, but definitely as restrictions ease, we'll see a lot of people from a lot of places.
Awesome. I want to get both of you to talk a little bit about funding. We've had a few different questions around funding. It feels like a lot of what you do are volunteer powered, and you've both mentioned digging at separate points today. But Mary was wondering, I think this is more specifically for Jared, if there's grants to help with the costs of developing and maintaining the trails. She specifically mentioned Land and Water Conservation Fund program, and then also what the grant was for the pump track. So if you could talk a little bit about what your fundraising has looked like over the past years, that'd be great.
We have primarily leveraged BIMBA funds. They're smaller, they can upwards of about $5,000. We've gotten some for trail tools, like $1,000 for trail tools. Pump track was maybe like $3,000, I forget. We got another one this year through VIMBA to improve the hospital trails. But we've had the most success with VIMBA. We have also worked pretty closely with the town. Our economic and community development director, I believe that's her title, in Bennington, is super awesome and loves what we do. And we've gotten a good relationship with her to kind of keep on the lookout for various grants that might have some overlap between the town and our interests. VOREC, which is Vermont Outdoor Recreation Economy, something like that, that's a big one this year. Pretty new. I think it's probably 2 years old, but this year, like, I want to say $5 million in funds are available for grants. So,
and isn't the most recent been like 100,000 or something per year, and now it's up in the millions?
Yep. So check that one out. Also, the Land and Water Conservation, we've gone through that. We tried getting one through that. Also EPA, we tried through them. But definitely establish a good relationship with the town, and maybe some other nonprofits in the area that have similar goals.
I think around funding, this is for both of you. Has it always been clear that the fundraising you want to be doing is specifically for, it seems like you've paid mostly for materials and maybe machinery and then relied on volunteer labor. Do you either of you ever feel like these projects are moving in a direction of needing more formal organization around them? Or do you feel like the future looks volunteer powered for both of them?
It's hard to
I
say.
mean, I know you probably wish you could get paid for, you know what I mean? That's like, is that, you know, is there like an organizational structure that you think about, or is it working the way it is?
I mean, as from my standpoint, like it's pretty much just me making decisions right now, and that's okay for right now. Like I'm happy to be calling all the shots, but like really what we should have a board and things like that, and where, you know, people are helping me make decisions and giving me their input. And there's people that I definitely reach out to for input and advice and things like that. I mean, like I definitely need more structure as I continue. But as far as like from our organization standpoint, we will definitely always be volunteer, no questions asked.
Nice. I think you get to recruit Jared to be on your board when you form it, right? Like, so it would be like reciprocal board service.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So for our group for BATS, you know, I'll kind of just describe a few different bike groups in Vermont and how they operate. You've got some that are self-sustaining, legit nonprofits that have paid positions. And how you get to that point is, you know, there's various ways you can be a huge group like Fellowship of the Wheel up in Burlington and have something like a couple thousand members, and that pays for staff and all that stuff. You can have some very philanthropic and wealthy people in the community that might want to donate for paid positions. I can think of a few chapters like that. Slate Valley Trails in Pulteney is one of them. And then you can have, you know, groups like us that are, you know, just kind of grassroots. I wish we had a little bit of, you know, a little bit more money, or, you know, more flexibility and options like these other chapters, but we're still in a very good spot, given that we do a lot of work, we do a lot of volunteer work, and I think people recognize that because we seem to get grants. But yeah, there's if we had a lot of money, we'd be employing a trail crew, and, you know, somebody with a mini excavator, and get more signage up. But that stuff's really expensive. You know, when you look at some of the professionally built trails, mountain bike trails, you're looking at like 20 grand for a mile. So
Every machinery seems so expensive.
Yeah, I mean, we can't do that. We don't. It takes a big commitment to do that. You know, you got to really fundraise or really have a golden goose in the community that you can tap into. So.
Is in the absence of having that, is there training that you need? I think this was a question that Sarah asked earlier. Is there any formal training you need for trail building, or is it something that anyone can just kind of do?
We did, when we first incorporated as a nonprofit VIMBA chapter, they sent us to a weekend trail building clinic. Totally free of charge, awesome weekend. There are, so no, there's no formal trail building designation you need or license. Some people have a really good eye for it. We have been employing a high school, well, he's not a high school kid anymore, but he's now a college freshman. We've been employing a kid for 2 years now to build for us. He's been with us since the beginning, has built trail when he was in like middle school. And he's gotten really good at it. He has an eye for it. He's got, well, you know, he's a strong, hardworking kid, and we've been hiring him through another nonprofit that we're closely aligned with, Prospect Mountain Association, which is our cross-country ski area here in the Bennington area. And they are a nonprofit as well in Vermont Land Trust, but have paid staff, so we're able to use their payroll. So we've been using him, and we're also exploring options with our trade school career development center here in Bennington through the supervisory union. Forestry program for that will be making some bridges for us this summer. So.
Very cool. I think Stephanie had to step away. If you're there, Stephanie, you can hop back on. But so I'm not. Can you read your question, because I'm not quite sure I understand it.
Yeah, so I kind of want to know if it's worth hiring someone with a name when it comes to trail building versus having volunteers. And when I say worth it, I mean, you know, the outdoor economy. So if you have a named trail builder, will they come to your community, come to your town and use your trails? Or does it not matter?
You have the money, I would.
Let's just pretend you have the money. Is it worth it?
I think so. I like having a variety of trails. Like, so a professional trail builder will often, use a mini excavator, machinery. They do some handwork, but it's going to be a certain kind of trail. And we like to, in the mountain bike world, we call them flow trails. And they are very well built, sculpted into the landscape. You're looking at like rollers, big berms around the corner, designed for heavy use. A lot of people riding. If you go to a Kingdom Trails, that's the type of trail you're going to see, or up in Stowe or Killington. Places that get a lot of like tourist traffic. You're going to see that type of trail. And so I guess like if you want that kind of activity in your community, if you want like a big bike scene and a lot of people like on the trails, eventually you're going to have that type of trail. We have something kind of in the middle. All our stuff is hand built. We have not used any machinery, but if you dumped in, if we suddenly started seeing 100 more users per week, we'd have to start redesigning our trails because they'd get hammered and beat up. So I think that answers your question kind of. Maybe look at the use and planned use of what you want. And if you want a high visibility, popular, bringing people from out of town type network, it might be worthwhile to hire a professional trail builder.
Cool. Any other questions? I'm looking at Lisa's question. I see. So, if you have a town and there's kind of small different trail areas, maybe, and Lisa, you can tell me, you can correct me when I'm done and go into more detail, but is a town like Brattleboro better off to kind of have those small trail systems join forces? and be as connected as possible? Is there a benefit to that kind of connectivity that you don't get with this kind of smaller independent trail system?
I would, it takes a while to build out a trail network. Whether it's, it just in general, whether you have money or not, it takes a while to build. And, when we first thought about the Bennington area trail system, our name suggests that it's actually a system, throughout the town, but which, we envisioned that, but that hasn't happened yet, and I'm not sure if it will.
But
We focus.
when you use the
Focus.
word
Say
system,
again?
would you just define, when you use the word system, are you saying that they're connected, and that's how that word is being used physically?
Yeah, like I'd say a bike network might be like an isolated area, like a few parcels, kind of like what we have here in on Mount Anthony Network. A trail system might be like Kingdom Trails, where you've got different pockets around, and we kind of envisioned that for Bennington, but I just don't see it happening anytime soon, just because it's been enough of a headache dealing with, like, the 5-6 property owners that we work with. I just can't imagine dealing with dozens of property owners and different, like, pockets throughout the town. I think that's best. There are other trails in town, but they have different entities, like the town runs some. And I guess it would mostly just be the town.
Jared, if I could follow up quick, I think maybe, I guess I'd love if you could confirm if I'm on the right track or not. And that is it a different approach when you have landowners coming together interested in developing a system versus mountain bikers coming together hoping to develop a system on separate parcels of land? Does that make sense?
So you're saying the landowners are coming together, expressing interest in a trail system?
Yes.
That's great.
I think that is a bit of a different approach that we're trying to take in Brattleboro.
Yeah, I mean, if you can get people coming forward to you and saying, hey, I'm open to having this type of use on my property. Could be just hiking, could be dogs, could be no biking, could be only biking. If you can kind of flesh that out, I think that's a worthwhile approach there.
Can I keep going on that train? So, but it's not a system in that all of those trails are never going to be connected physically. But the idea is if we all come together and we present as a united network, then does that make us stronger and more clear to people, to the users of, wow, Brattleboro is a place that we can go and ride on many trails in many different places?
Yeah, I think it's a large undertaking to go that route. It's going to take a lot of oversight. Who would the landowners go to when there's an issue?
Yeah, I mean, these are all entities. So Retreat Farm is on the call. Lisa is Winston Prouty. So these aren't actual landowners like me in my backyard. They're entities that own trails, and instead of each trail needing to say, here we are, we're a trail, we say, here's Brattleboro, we have trails.
So we, maybe like 4 or 5 years ago, the town got a tiny little grant to, I guess, kind of do that, like map out all the trails in town. You know, the BATS trails, the River Walk, the North Bennington Mile Around Woods, the Robert Frost Trail, all kind of the recreational trails in town, and just made a trail map and put that out there for, they probably have it on their town website, print out copies here and there. But to kind of pull that all together into one entity is a lot of work and a lot of different types of areas, trails, flavors of trail for, I think, one group to oversee. But it would definitely be something to like promote, I think.
This feels like such a naive question to ask related to that. Will like out me as not being a mountain biker. But if you're mountain biking on a certain set of trails, can you go on the road for a little while to get to another set of trails? Like how much does the connectivity have to stay? Like
Yeah, you can totally go on trails.
Yeah, because I'm thinking about a lot of
roads,
the trail system that I think Lisa and Stephanie have in mind. And there's like short areas of roadway that separate what would otherwise be connected trails. And would that be, you know, too much of an obstacle?
And just a quick follow up with Lisa and Stephanie. We work a fair amount with the Regional Commission, BCRC. I know you guys have your own regional commission out there. Maybe, is anybody on the call affiliated with it? No.
No.
Okay. But yeah, that townwide trail recreation map was done by the BCRC, and they have people in their office that kind of stuff is in their wheelhouse. They're able to kind of think like, you know, planning wise, recreation wise, like how do we pull in and get a big picture. So I would definitely get in touch with the regional commission.
And this is definitely a leap we've already taken, but I just want to tell people, if you have your project in mind, sorry, a little coffee. If you have your project in mind and you want to ask specific questions that relate to your project, now is a great time to be asking those questions, and you can tell us about your project, and that is all great.
I'd love to hear from Gary. I know the town of Rockingham, you know, he's got a lot of things, you know, in the works around recreation. I guess I'm just curious to hear, Gary, if this is ringing true for you. Are you finding similar struggles in getting, you know, the recreation aspect up and running?
So I've learned a lot from listening to the Bennington experience. In developing the different trails, those questions have come up from each group about the family oriented and mixing with the mountain bikes when they're at the base of the steep trails, and mixing even just the bikers and the hikers, never mind getting into the, you know, the dog paths and the and horses and you know, the vision folks have here is sounds like it totally won't work. So there's maybe 4 different trails groups, and our Windham County Trails Alliance, that VIMBA one is one of the groups. And I didn't realize they were just local to Bellows Falls, but that does make sense. A couple of the board members were the ones here building the trails on the mountainside. But the way that the trails groups work together, each one is managing their trails. So the agreements with the landowners and working through those, the Saxons River Valley Trail Initiative is working with the property owners on there, and Windham County Trails Alliance is working with the property owners on the ridge, the steep mountainside one, and there's some town land involved, and so it sounds like we couldn't run into some trouble there. The trouble that we have run into is when there's, we haven't been able to make a connection, either because the property owner hasn't been willing, or they want too much money for it to sell an easement, because they don't want to just let let it happen. And or where there's a bridge needed over a stream, and then starting to get into the wetlands, and you need the river corridor study. And there's just, the stuff's slow and meticulous, and it seems to help for each trails group to have an organization managing it and work on it. But the vision that we have is like folks have been talking about here today, the network where all of these 3 different trails are connected. And we did get a VORIC grant for the pump track and the map creation, marketing piece. And so we have, with the Wyndham Regional Commission, has made a great map of the trails. And there's little dotted lines or blanks where they're not connected. But the goal would be to, over time, make those connections. And certainly it seems possible to figure out a bridge over a stream, if that's the only piece where it's not connecting, or where the path has to go on to a main road and there's a bridge without a sidewalk. It costs money, but they do have cantilevered little trails you can attach to the side of the bridge. And so it seems like it will take like 5 or 10 years to get through all of these pieces. But when I started seeing all these trails groups working together and coming to the town, and we started like writing grants and how can we help, and the first piece that came to mind was that being able to travel throughout the state, or even with New Hampshire. And there had been a Wyndham Regional Commission study they did with VTrans that has a trail built from Brattleboro to Bellows Falls that crosses into New Hampshire some, and has some pieces along the rail lines. And it's hundreds of pages thick. And it has for each section all of the challenges, like, okay, so here's an active rail line. And so negotiating with the railroad, there's a challenge. And okay, so here you have to, at any rate, it feels like the best thing to do would be to have that network. So across the river in New Hampshire, there's the Monadnock Regional Rail Trail Collaborative, and they think they're working into Brattleboro and the West River Trail, and they have trails that go out through Keene and connect up. And it's not that hard for us to connect up with them, but it really does seem like it's worth having a 10-year plan that makes these connections, that identifies all the pieces missing for the connections. And wouldn't it be great to just have a map that shows where you could travel around Brattleboro's trail systems and then get over to Keene and check those out. And then, right, even if it's camping or if it's going home every day, or whatever it is, it seems like it would be a worthwhile effort, as long as it would take.
Thanks to the internet and web maps these days, you're seeing a lot of that kind of naturally happening. Trail Finder is a website that I believe is based out of the Upper Valley, but it has all the trails in Vermont, New Hampshire. Trail Forks is sort of mountain bike specific, but global web map of trails.
Hi.
You know, there might be more out there than you know, and to kind of see it on a map might give you some ideas. But there's, people travel for that. And when I'm going over, if I go up to Bellows Falls for the day from Bennington, I'm looking at the app on my phone for trails. And there was one guy here in town in Shaftesbury that volunteered his time to just put trails into one of these apps. So
Oh, that's so cool.
yeah. And we do it with our BATS trails and stuff.
You put them in there, yeah.
We put them in-
Well,
onto the
I'm thinking about Lisa's
Trailworks.
property. Oh, sorry, go ahead. I'm thinking about Lisa's property. I feel like there's like a need for like a trail potential evaluator, like consultant, to like, because where the Winston Prouty campus is, I rent from Lisa's my landlord, and my rent office space. And here we've had some people say, oh, this could be like Kingdom Trails. This is so sweet. And there's a great trail system already here, but like kind of like, making it perfect for mountain biking. And then other people are like, it's really not that much of a mountain, like it's a little. So I'm so curious to actually get like a mountain biker's perspective on, is there potential or is there not potential? Because it's it connects to a lot of different places. So if you're ever in Brattleboro and you need to check out something and see if it would be a promising trail, let us know. Does anyone have any questions as we look towards wrapping up? I know that people have 2:00 meetings, so I know we've been here and I want to make sure everyone has time to stretch and take a break if you have more work to do today. Hopefully you don't, but.
If I could just, Andre Ann and Jared, I really appreciate your time and sharing with us today. I've taken in a lot as well, and I love the you're both sharing this message and story that it just takes a few people sometimes to really get something rolling, but to remember that it might take those same few people to keep it going and maintaining. And so, how do old folks like us make sure that what we're creating really has the ability to remain sustainable without us? So that's something I'm really taking away, because I have this sense, especially for you, Andrea, that if you were to be done with it today, the track might be done. And so how do we not create systems that have that risk? So thank you so much, both of you.
I think what I love about, having Jared and Andre Ann here, is it just, I feel like for some organizations, there's a propensity to like not invite in younger people to be sort of part of the leadership. And, I think, at least to me, what makes both these projects seem more sustainable is that they have a younger crowd, that's excited about it. And so, Lisa, I don't know, obviously, what your people look like that are working, but maybe it's getting younger people involved early on, so they feel ownership of it. And then, when you're done with it, that they may feel, empowered to keep it moving forward.
And not just but like the volunteer age almost seems irrelevant when I like the motivation being based on like even the younger kids, like
right.
For the kids on bikes thing. I just think there's something so magical about that when you have community things that are geared towards really young kids and families. And so I'm just so grateful that you guys have both done that work in Bennington.
I have a question for Andre Ann. If you could have known one thing that now before you started, like what would be that thing?
I guess just how much I am having to do to, this kind of goes on what I talked about earlier about needing more organization, but like right now I'm working on hopefully getting one of those kind of pre-built sheds for a registration booth. And it's actually my cousin, his 2 kids are really into racing. So he's really kind of my right-hand person. And we like can't find a time to meet up to like talk about it. And I'm like, well, this needs to get done. So I don't know. It's just, I just wish I had, I don't know. I guess I don't wish I knew this because I probably wouldn't have done it. But yeah, I just wish I had more help, which I know will come. And that's what's keeping me okay with it right now.
Yeah. Awesome.
Thank you both so much for your time. It was great to hear. I appreciate it. And thanks to everyone who joined today for your time. It was a great conversation. So enjoy your Friday afternoon.
Thanks.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everyone.